I'm Claire Adams, 27. A week ago, I graduated from Stanford with my MBA, an achievement that, in my family, might as well have happened on the moon. You'd think that would make me the golden child, wouldn't you? But in the Adams family, I was always the one standing just outside the frame of the photograph. My sister, Ashley, the future doctor, has always been the sun my parents orbit. I was just the practical one. The one who made sure the bills were paid and the chaos was managed. The one whose efforts were as invisible as they were essential. For years, I told myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, they'd finally see me. But a part of me always knew the truth. I was a stranger in my own family. What I couldn't have known was that the night meant to celebrate my biggest success would be the one to shatter the illusion for good. That my parents would speak words so cruel. They would sever the already frayed thread holding us together. In that moment, the daughter they never wanted finally decided to disappear. Have you ever heard something so devastating you wish you could scrub it from your memory? Especially on a day that was supposed to be yours? If my story feels familiar, maybe sharing it will help someone else remember their own worth. We were at Delmonico's, a place of hushed elegance in Seattle. With its starched white linens and warm glow of golden chandeliers, I had reserved the private dining room myself, covering every cost. It wasn't about flaunting money. After years of juggling side gigs, drowning in student loans, and relentless effort, I just wanted one perfect evening, one night to celebrate something I had clawed my way to achieve. I greeted each guest with a practiced smile, my favorite professor, colleagues from the consulting firm where I'd just landed a dream job, and classmates whose genuine pride in me was a warmth I wasn't used to. Then my parents arrived, Susan and Robert Adams. They were impeccably dressed, perfectly composed, as if they were the guests of honor at a party they were hosting. Their hands were empty. No flowers, no card. Ashley wasn't with them. A hospital shift, they said, though I suspected she simply didn't want to attend an event that wasn't about her. I made the rounds, introducing them. The compliments for me flowed freely, and for a moment, I let myself hope. One of my professors beamed at them. You must be so incredibly proud. A Stanford MBA is a remarkable feat. My mother offered a small, airy laugh. Oh, we're proud of both our girls, she said, her voice honeyed and dismissive. But our youngest, Ashley, she's in med school now, working all hours in the actually saving lives. That's the kind of thing that really matters. A beat of silence fell over the table. My smile stayed frozen in place, a mask I'd perfected over a lifetime. A few minutes later, my manager stood to give a toast. He spoke of my resilience, my leadership, my sharp mind. Claire is one of the most capable young consultants I've ever had the pleasure of working with, he concluded. She is absolutely destined for great things. The applause was genuine, a wave of warmth that washed over me. I turned to my parents, hungry for even a flicker of validation. My father let out a soft chuckle. She's clever, sure, but Ashley? She's in there saving lives every single day. Now that's the kind of pride that sticks. The words landed like a physical blow. It was as if my entire existence was merely a prelude to Ashley's greatness. The hero, the healer, the one who mattered. A hush fell over our end of the table. A kind coworker tried to smooth things over. Leaning in, she said gently to my mother, "Still, you must be so proud of Claire. What she's accomplished is incredible." My mother's smile was cool, almost condescending. "I suppose it's fine," she said. My father, as if on cue, launched into a detailed account of Ashley's latest heroic shift. He finished with a casual shrug, looking at me this time. Compared to a doctor, an MBA just doesn't quite measure up. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but with a clean, sharp finality. I pushed my chair back, the screech against the floor slicing through the chatter. Every conversation died. My voice, when I found it, was steadier than I felt. Do you have any idea what it took for me to get here? The sleepless nights? The years of working and studying so I wouldn't cost you a single cent? My mother's lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. My father just stared, as if I were a stranger causing a scene. I paid Ashley's tuition, I continued, my voice rising. I sent money home when the electricity was about to be shut off. I went without so this family could survive, and I am still dismissed as the one who just sits behind a desk. The air was thick, suffocating. I wasn't speaking to the room anymore. only to the two people who had never truly seen me. If I'm as worthless as you seem to think, then who do you think held this family together all these years? My father stood, his face flushed, his voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. Then we wish we never had a daughter like you. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The world tilted for a second, not from tears, but from a sudden, horrifying clarity. I looked at the shocked, sympathetic faces around the table, people who valued me, and then back at the two people who had just wished me out of existence. When I spoke, my voice was a whisper, but it carried. If that's what you wish, then I'll start living as if I never did. And I walked out. I didn't cry that night, not as I left the restaurant, my heels clicking on the wet Seattle pavement, not as I sat in the quiet dark of my apartment, but the next morning, when I unlocked my phone to 11 missed calls and a single text from my mother that read, "You embarrassed us. I hope you're proud of yourself." That's when something inside me finally gave way. It wasn't sadness. It was a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Because this wasn't an isolated incident. It was simply the most honest moment in a lifelong performance. I was finally too tired to continue. I wasn't surprised. I was just finished. My childhood was a study in contrasts. Ashley, 2 years younger, was the sun, and I was a distant planet, reflecting her light. Her birthdays were celebrations with towering cakes and golden balloons. My cake 1 year read, "Happy birthday, Ashley," and Claire, scrawled as an afterthought in the corner. A family joke. I learned to smile along with them. I learned early that my achievements were only valid if they fit their narrow definition of worth. I'll never forget bringing home a first-place certificate from a regional math competition. My mother didn't look up from the laundry. "That's nice, dear," she said. But Ashley just started volunteering at the hospital. She's really making an impact. Real impact. That was their mantra, and it always came with a stethoscope attached. Still, I pushed. I believed that if I just achieved enough, sacrificed enough, they'd finally say the words I was starving to hear, "We're proud of you, Claire." So I worked. Through college, I juggled 3 jobs. I opened the coffee shop at dawn, scrubbed offices at night, and tutored on weekends, and every paycheck disappeared into the family fund, into Ashley's ever-growing med school expenses. No one ever asked how I managed. They just accepted it, as if my silent labor was simply the cost of doing business. My friend Michael used to say I was the only person who could balance a family budget faster than she could recognize her own worth. He'd say it with a gentle smile, his eyes full of a sadness that mirrored my own. Michael had been my anchor since college. He knew the weight of family disappointment firsthand. His father, a rigid military man, disowned him for choosing art over engineering. But unlike me, Michael never spent a single day begging for approval. "You can't water dead roots, Claire," he told me once. "It's not your fault when nothing grows." I thought he was being cynical. I thought loyalty meant giving until there was nothing left. But after that night, his words became a lifeline. He called after the disaster. I couldn't answer, but I replayed his voicemail a dozen times. "Claire, I'm proud of you, not for what you achieved, but for finally walking away. Call me when you're ready to breathe." I wasn't ready, but for the first time, I felt the faint, intoxicating possibility of air. When I left my old life, I didn't take much: my laptop, some clothes, my books, and one framed photo from college, Michael and me on the campus lawn, holding coffee, grinning like we hadn't yet learned how much the world could hurt. I found a small 1-bedroom in Bellevue. Simple. A place with hardwood floors and a wide window that looked out onto a quiet, tree-lined street. It was mine. Paid for by me. Chosen by me. For me. That first night, I lay on a mattress on the floor, staring at an unfamiliar ceiling. The silence was vast, but the longer I listened, the more I understood. It wasn't emptiness. It was peace. A peace I hadn't known I was capable of feeling. The next morning, I opened my laptop. 3 automatic payments were scheduled, to my parents' utilities, to Ashley's tuition, to the family mortgage. My fingers trembled as I clicked into each one and canceled them. No note, no explanation, just done. A strange, terrifying lightness settled in my chest. In the weeks that followed, I started to build a life that was entirely my own. Work became an unexpected source of joy. My manager handed me a major project, and I poured myself into it, not for praise, but for the pure satisfaction of the work. My name started to circulate in meetings, not as Ashley's sister, but as Claire Adams, a person in my own right. Evenings became sacred. I'd come home to my quiet apartment, adding pieces that felt like me, a soft gray couch, a whimsical lamp shaped like a tree branch, a bookshelf for my paperbacks. I filled the window with succulents, lit candles, and played jazz while cooking dinner for one. It felt wonderfully, rebelliously selfish. One Saturday, Michael showed up with Thai food and a bottle of wine. He stepped inside, took in the space, and smiled. "Still breathing?" I smiled back. A real one this time. "I think I'm finally starting to live." We sat on the floor, eating noodles and drinking cheap wine, laughing about college. For a while, life felt simple again. "I like this place," he said, looking around. "It feels like you." I hesitated, a faint smile on my lips. "I think I'm still figuring out what that means." He lifted his glass, his eyes warm, to figuring it out. Our glasses touched, and a quiet warmth spread through me, not pride or relief, but something gentler, perhaps the first stirring of self-acceptance, or at least the sense that I was finally moving toward it. Later that night, as I folded a blanket over the back of the couch, my phone buzzed. Mom. Then again. Dad. No messages, just a string of missed calls, 10 in total. I didn't answer. I didn't even check them. Instead, I switched the phone to silent, wrapped myself in the blanket, and watched the streetlights flicker through the window. They had chosen silence for years. Now, I was returning it, a silence they'd finally be forced to hear. Then came the knock, not gentle or uncertain, firm, deliberate, demanding, the kind that doesn't wait for an answer but insists on being heard. I glanced at the clock, 4:13 on a Tuesday. I'd just returned from work, still in heels, my blazer slipping from my shoulders. When I opened the door, I went still. There they stood, my parents, Robert and Susan Adams, as if nothing had ever happened. They looked immaculate, like visitors inspecting property they still believed was theirs. My father wore a crisp button-down and polished leather shoes. My mother stood rigid in her beige trench coat, arms crossed, lips drawn tight for battle. I said nothing. I didn't move. "We need to talk," my mother announced. The last time we'd spoken, she'd told me I'd humiliated the family, yet here she was on my doorstep, pretending the wound didn't exist. Without waiting for a response, they walked past me into my apartment. I closed the door slowly behind them, as if one wrong sound might set something off. They settled onto my couch, the one I'd bought myself, in the living room I'd built from sleepless nights and hard work, with money they'd never thanked me for. I stayed standing. "Claire," my father began, adjusting his tone into that smooth, professional cadence he used for meetings. "Ashley's run into some setbacks." Setbacks, that was the word he chose. Her hospital internship was terminated, staff cuts, my mother said curtly, and her tuition, the remaining balance hasn't been paid. If that doesn't get resolved soon, Ashley might have to leave the program. "And?" I asked, my tone flat. My mother shot back, "We need your help." There it was, no apology, no remorse, just the same old refrain. "Help?" I echoed, as if the word were foreign. "Claire, you understand how critical this is," my father said, his voice measured. "If she falls behind now, she could lose everything." I asked quietly, "Are you?" My mother's gaze hardened. "Don't be petty." I let out a sharp, dry laugh that startled even me. I gave up years of my life for this family, paid bills when the lights went out, bought Ashley's textbooks, covered her rent, her groceries. I sacrificed so she could have it all. And the one time, just once, I asked for something back, you told me I disgraced you. We were angry. My father barked. "You were disrespectful." I stepped closer, my heels striking the floor and cutting through the tension. "No," I said evenly. "You disrespected me for years, quietly, consistently, until it became the rhythm of our family. You didn't raise me. You drained me." My mother straightened, arms unfolding. "We're your parents," she said sharply. "We brought you into this world. And I carried it," I replied, the words rising from somewhere deep. "I carried it while you stood on my back and praised someone else for standing taller." The air between us tightened. thin as wire, ready to snap. You don't get to walk in here and pretend none of that happened, I said quietly but with force. You don't get to act like you never told me you wished I'd never been born. My father's mouth opened, then shut again, the silence doing all the talking. I moved to the door and held it wide. If you came here to apologize, I'd listen. But if you came to ask for more, that conversation ended the night you disowned me. Neither of them moved. Claire, this is family, my mother said, her voice climbing. Blood is blood. Not when it's toxic, I said, shaking my head and nodding toward the hallway. They left stiffly, wordless, but before stepping through the doorway, my mother turned and said, "You'll regret this. Someday you'll realize you need your family." I met her eyes without blinking. I already have one. It just doesn't include you. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and for the first time, there was nothing inside me but quiet. No guilt, no fear, no doubt, just air, cool and clean, still free. This time, when the door shut behind them, I didn't cry, I smiled. The weeks that followed moved in quiet rhythm. No calls, no texts, just silence. The same silence they once demanded from me, except now it wasn't submission, it was strength. Not the silence of someone shrinking, but the calm of someone who had finally found her own voice in the quiet. At work, I poured myself into everything. I led meetings with a confidence that felt unfamiliar at first, like wearing someone else's jacket, until I realized it had always been tailored for me. People listened when I spoke. Clients began asking for me by name. Then came the big assignment, a multi-million-dollar restructuring for a tech giant out of Redmond, the kind of project that defines a young consultant's career. My manager handed it to me without hesitation. "You've earned this," he said. "Don't look back." And I didn't. For 6 weeks, I lived and breathed that project. Strategy sessions, late-night slide decks, pivot tables spinning across the screen until my eyes stung. But it didn't feel like burnout this time. It felt like purpose, sharp, alive, mine. At night, I came home to an apartment that finally felt complete. The gray couch scattered with soft pillows, shelves neatly stacked with books I'd once kept boxed away, candles glowing faintly in the corners, filling the room with quiet warmth. It wasn't the house I grew up in. It was the home I'd built for myself, one emotional brick at a time. Michael stopped by often. Sometimes we didn't even talk, just shared leftovers in comfortable silence. Other nights we played old records and argued about our college playlists. "You're different," he said once, leaning back on my couch, a glass of red wine in hand. I looked at him, curious. "Different how?" "You seem whole," he said softly, "like you finally stopped waiting for someone to choose you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The steady warmth rising in my chest spoke for me. Then came the article. Our project had exceeded every forecast. The client renewed, doubled their investment, and publicly credited our team's strategy. And there it was, my name, bold and unmistakable, front and center. A local business magazine reached out for an interview. I said yes, though a part of me hesitated. I wasn't accustomed to being visible. But during the interview, I told the truth, not just about the project's success, but about the road that led me there. Without pointing fingers, I spoke about what it means to grow up unseen, to chase validation that never comes, and to finally stop needing it. The article was titled, "Rising Star, Claire Adams on Leading Through Resilience." It spread fast, first hundreds of likes, then thousands. My inbox filled with messages from strangers who said my words felt like their own. People confessed they'd cried reading them. One sentence kept getting shared over and over. "You don't have to earn love from people who use it as a weapon." Michael texted me a screenshot of that line circulating. "Damn, Claire," he wrote, "you started a quiet revolution." But not everyone stayed quiet. Emails began flooding in from my parents, clipped, angry, seething. "You've humiliated this family. How dare you speak about us in public? Ashley's struggling and you're out there showing off." I didn't answer. They shifted from guilt to accusation and finally back to silence. And I stayed still. For once, I didn't feel compelled to defend, explain, or repair. I let it shatter. And this time, I didn't rush to pick up the pieces. One evening, I stood before my floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of wine in hand, watching the Seattle skyline glitter as if it were quietly rooting for me. I thought of that younger version of myself, the one who used to send half her paycheck home, waiting for gratitude that never came. I remembered that dinner. That single cruel sentence. "We wish we never had a daughter like you." And then it hit me. I used to believe silence meant surrender. Now I understood silence could be strength. The celebration I threw wasn't extravagant. It was small on purpose. No upscale venue. No obligatory guest list filled with names I barely recognized. Just a handful of close friends. Colleagues who'd stood by me when life unraveled. And Michael, naturally, who arrived with 2 bottles of wine and a ridiculously large cheese board he insisted on arranging himself. It wasn't a party for achievement. It was a toast to endurance. I had just signed a leadership contract with the firm, not something gifted to me, but a position I'd earned and negotiated entirely on my own. No one else's influence shadowed it. No strings tugged from behind. The apartment glowed in warm amber light. Soft jazz and indie tracks filled the background. Beyond the windows, Puget Sound shimmered under the night sky, the city pulsing gently, alive. Laughter rippled through the room. Someone raised a glass in my honor, and I laughed, too, not the practiced, polite sound I'd once used to fill silence, but a genuine, unrestrained laugh, the kind that feels like breathing again. No one brought up Ashley. No one mentioned my parents. No one gave me that look of sympathy I'd grown used to. What I saw instead was pride and something softer, something that finally felt like love. Michael tapped his glass against mine and smiled. "Look around you," he said, gesturing toward the laughter and light. "This is the family you built, Claire." I nodded, the truth of it sinking in. "Yeah," I said quietly, "the kind that chose me, too." Later, when everyone had gone, I stepped out onto the balcony. The air from the bay was brisk, clean, brushing through my hair like it was clearing away what was left of the past. Below, Seattle's lights shimmered like scattered stars. I finished the last sip of my wine and let myself breathe. I thought of all the unseen sacrifices, the years I kept giving until there was nothing left to give. I thought of that dinner, of those words I'll never unhear. But then I remembered the first time I stood up for myself. The first night I slept here, alone but safe. The first time someone told me they were proud of me and meant it. And it hit me. Maybe we don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to decide which parts of that story stay with us, and which ones we finally set down. Maybe love that demands proof isn't love at all. Maybe real freedom is learning to stop needing what was never freely offered. From inside, my phone began to buzz. Another message. This time from someone I didn't know. A stranger who'd read the article, found me through the noise, and wrote, "Your story helped me finally walk away from the pain I thought I had to accept." I smiled. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were they. I stepped back inside and turned off the lights. The room still held the warmth of laughter, the faint scent of wine and candles lingering in the air. I'd spent years pleading for acknowledgement. Now I was finished pleading. I was creating. I was choosing. And for the first time, I knew exactly who I was. Not a daughter to be managed. Not a fallback plan. Not an invisible thread holding others together. Just me. Whole enough. Free. I may not be the daughter they wanted, but I am, at last, my own.